You are listening to Fika with Vicky on United Public Radio, 107.7 and 105.3 from New Orleans.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fika. Our guest today is Shane Joseph. Shane is an author of novels, short stories, and nonfiction. He's also the owner and publisher of Blue Denim Press, a columnist, blogger, and reviewer. Several months ago, an author queried me, stating that Blue Denim Press was her publisher. Since I had never heard of Blue Denim Press, sorry, Shane. I had to investigate. And when I got to the part on their website that said submit manuscript, submissions should be in manuscript form, I gasped in disbelief. Certainly this was a fairy tale. Did such publishers still exist? So, being the cynical person that I am about such things, I messaged the author, and she said yes, it was true. Then I read her book, and I was definitely impressed. Janice Barrett will be joining us in September. So now I had a publisher who accepted manuscripts without an agent and put out quality work. I had no choice. I had to read Shane's own novels. And 3/4 of the way through Empire in the Sand, I couldn't wait anymore. I had to invite him to Fika. Now, having read two of his novels, Circles in the Spiral and Empire in the Sand, and his blog, I totally believe that he would run an independent press on his own terms. Those two novels are not for the faint of the heart. They're real, gritty, and move so quickly I couldn't even gasp because I was breathless from trying to keep up. It's been an adventure, and the show hasn't even started yet. So thanks for the stories, Shane, the real, the fictional, and even the one I just shared. Welcome to Fika.
Yes, well, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
There's so much I want to know. So there was no way I was going to not invite you, and probably there was no way I was going to take no for an answer. So you need to be here, Shane. So I don't know where to start with you, but I think I'm going to start with the blogs because the ideas from the blogs bleed into the writing and it all becomes sort of one force. But before I even start with this, what would possess you to start your own publishing house? That's a biggie.
That's a very big question. It must have been around 2010. I had already published 3 books through another small publisher. And I was looking at the publishing landscape. At that point, the big 6 was starting to become the big 4. The middle tier of publishing was collapsing. A lot of medium-sized publishers were either merging or going out of business. And a lot of other writers who were being stranded were going into self-publishing. And so the landscape was getting fragmented, if you will, on one side and consolidated on the other side. And the chances for newcomers was going to be less and less because there's going to even be less and less opportunities for the existing writers. So at that point, I realized that I needed to own my own channel. I had to start my own press. And a good thing, too, because the 2 publishers that I had been with, one sold out and the other one closed its doors. So the landscape for small publishers was very uncertain. So I started the press in 2010, and we started our first publishing in 2011. We started with 2 books a year, went to 3 books, and now we're at 4 books, sometimes 5. But that's about as much as I can manage as a lone gunman, if you will. The intention is that I would, when I have my own books ready to go, I take a long time with them, that they would go through this channel, but that I would also publish deserving authors who are in the same situation as I am. You know, they are kind of mid-career or late career or second career, and they have difficulties breaking into the publishing business. and they have good work. And so that work needs to be showcased. And so that's the intention that I have. I'm not in this to make money. There is no money. But
As we keep telling people.
I'm not to lose money either. So I'm quite prudent about whom I pick and how I distribute and how much I spend. But it is, and so by doing that, we've gone now for 13 publishing seasons, 13 years, and going into our 14th year next year. And I'm hoping I can do this for as long as I'm able to do it. And the writers have followed me. I have now published over 40 titles, and I have a stable of very devoted writers who stick with me and come back to me from time to time. So it was a good decision, and it's been a good venture so far.
I know Janice's book is amazing, and there's a couple other I have my eyes on there. There's one about a railroad town. It's a historical book. I can't quite remember the title now, but it has a picture. The cover is of a rail. It's not out yet. Of I believe it's about a small town, and they're trying to run out the women of disrepute.
Oh yes, end of the line. You must read that. That's a great book. I've had that book sent to me about 3 times because we worked over it over the years. I knew it was a good book. I knew it had to come out, but it was not ready. And it's got a unique style, which I really like. It's the whole town is the character, and so the voices of the town are speaking, and so it breaks most of the rules of novel craft, but it's a damn good novel.
Well, a lot of those damn good novels do break a lot of the rules of the novel craft. I have found. So how many novels do you think you sift through in say a year?
Well, I don't get too many. I don't get overwhelmed. I get about 30.
You will now.
30 yes, I probably might. 30 to 40, let's say at the low end, because I'm also quite discerning. And I think people have got used to the fact that I'm not going to just take anything that comes to me. So I get about 30 good ones. And then out of the 30, I might get 6 or 7 really good ones. And then I have to go through the heartbreaking job of declining a few because I can only do 4. So what I do is I quickly read through the beginning, middle, and end of all the submissions I get. Because if those 3 components hold, then the book has got some legs in it. Usually I find the beginning is very good because it has been polished several times and sent out to several publishers, so it is really good. The middle kind of sags a little bit, and the ending kind of falls apart. So those books I leave to a side. The ones where all 3 components hold, I then would read completely from end to end. And then I pick the ones that I think would fit and would work for me. And also I have to pick authors who I can work with, because I don't really want egotistical authors who think that they're the best thing since sliced bread and the whole world is in a favor. No, I want an author who will work with me, because I think 1 + 1 = 3.
Right.
And you can ask Janice when she's on the show. I mean, I certainly do bring some value to the book. The finished product does have some input from me, and the author, of course, is doing all the writing. But I think with the input from a publisher and also playing the editor and the marketer and the spiritual advisor and the mentor, you're going to end up with a better book.
Oh my goodness, you're all the characters in Circle the Spiral now. I always say we're all the characters in the story. No, go ahead.
Yeah, so that's what I think ends up happening. And so I picked my 4. And what I also do is for the top 7 or 8 that I think could have been published. And when I do send those rejection notices, I hate to call that rejection notice, but it's a kind of a saying, thank you, but no thank you, or not now. I also try to give them some comments to say, here's what you can do to improve
nice.
the book, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes I get back not so nice replies because, it's disappointing.
Are you serious?
Well, some of them get a little upset. It's understandable. But there have been others, and this is, Janet Trull's book, the one we just talked about, End of the Line, is a good example where Janet sent me her book 3 years ago, and I rejected it with some feedback. and then she sent it back again, and I rejected it again with more feedback. And she took the feedback seriously, and has turned out what I think is a very, very good book right now. So some of them do come back with that feedback, and that's why I think providing the feedback, even though it's a chore, is something worth doing, because you might be able to save something and bring it back to life. So that's been my process, and it has worked so far.
Well, I think getting some feedback, not just a big red stamp that says no deal, it makes the author feel human. It makes them feel like they have been heard. And I think that is such a nice gesture, because those things don't happen much anymore in this world.
Yeah,
And
and the reason I do that is also because I'm a writer, and I know how humiliating and soul crushing it is when you get a rejection slip, right? So I'm putting myself on the other side when I'm writing the letter, to saying, say firm things, but kind things. Don't destroy them.
so you did write a blog on this subject. Have publishers outsource their slush piles to literary agents? And so and we covered most of that already in our conversation, but why it is it because your business is so small and personal that you want to read these and decide which ones you're going to work with? Or do you think that the publishing industry is missing out on something by having the agents read these books and decide which ones come to them?
I think they're both valid points. For me, the first point, yes, because I'm a small press, I'd like to know what I'm publishing. I don't want to see anything that I didn't know about come up later as a libel suit or something like that. So I want to read what I'm going to publish, and I need to like what I'm going to publish. In terms of outsourcing to agents, I think it works for the big publishing houses, because they do probably get 50 times what I get or more, and they need to have some kind of gatekeeper to check these things. But if you're a small enough press and you outsource it to an agent, you lose control of that mine of content that's coming your way, because the agent's going to look at it from a commercial standpoint, from what makes money, right? Because they're paid a commission based on what the author makes. So their objectives may be different from my objectives, which are more artistic and more literary, and really I don't care about the money as much as I care about something of quality. That's something that's different from what has been put out into this mass of literature that exists today. So that's why for me, putting a gatekeeper like an agent doesn't work, because my objectives and theirs are different.
And we were discussing something of that in the green room, I'll call it, before the show, that you are getting with independent publishers, with independent writers. Indie is my favorite word, because to me it means independent voice. It doesn't mean independent in the publishing process or whatever. You can find something different than what's trending now in the publishing world. And I think that's important. So thank you for that too, Shane. Thank you for being part of that and bringing these different ideas to us. Now, I'm going to go through all your blogs first, because I find his blogs just as entertaining as his books. He has a good blog section. I have it running across the bottom of the screen here. His website. Also, if you just search in your browser, Shane Joseph author, you're going to get it. But there it is, shanejoseph.com. Pretty straightforward. You will find his blog there, and you will be entertained. There's lots of different topics, not just writing. But the one I want to talk about is she lost her spot. In praise of indie writers, we talk a little bit about the trends. You talk about the trends and what it means to be a brand, and what it means to be, you know what I'm saying, Shane. Take it from here.
Yes. Now, in fairness, I've kind of classified them as brandies.
Yes.
Brand is meaning an author who has a brand name behind him, like a J.K. Rowling, right? So if you see a new book by that author, you would pick the book up sight unseen because you know what she stands for. Whereas a guy like me, they need to know me first. Hopefully on the show, they might get to know me, but they need to know me first before they can pick up my book. And so it's a harder sell. I have to try a little harder to get that book into their hands and to get them to read it. So that's the challenge between indie and brandy. Now, that said, I'd like to be a brandy one day. I'm hopeful that someday somebody will pick me up as an author and publish me through a Random House or somebody. And then I could sit back and let them do the work of getting me the introductions, getting me on these shows.
But could you?
I mean, I don't know.
Could you let them run the show?
I don't know. It's just a dream. Right?
As a dream, I'm skeptical of.
Yeah.
But hey.
The reality is that I have to do it myself. And you're right. The independent authors have less filters and less controls on them. They have to be less politically correct. In fact, if you read Circle.
I still am arguing that with you because I do not feel, I have read a lot of books that I mentioned that I have thrown over my shoulder and said that's not coming through. And I don't feel that way about that book. But you go on, we'll discuss that later.
Yeah. But all I'm saying is that there's less filters and less controls on the indie writer. So he's able to be a lot more creative and explore areas that the branded authors may be somewhat prevented from, because I think their editors shape the directions in which they can go and the limits to which they can go. So yes. So there's pros and cons. I'm an indie right now, wanting to be a brandy, but you're right. If I become a brandy, I might lose some of my artistic control.
You will, and you won't like it. Okay. And I just met this man, so I may be wrong, but just from reading him stuff, I don't think so. So we'll discuss. It is true, and the point is, if the indie authors want to be read, want to develop a brand of their own, then they should still take in some of these boundaries, because they don't want to upset their audience either, right? So. Yes. They still have to look at those things. I think that it's important. So we'll go to the books now, because I love the books. I really do. You wouldn't be here if I didn't. And to me, they are the books of a common, and I don't like using that term, but I'm going to use it because it describes it, the common man, what we call the common man. What you just informed me was the everyman, but I'll let people figure that out for themselves, how that works out. And there aren't, it's not like, spies and the CIA and federal agents all swooping in to add the excitement to this thriller. This is completely about people and the cause and effect in their lives. And I found that was true of both of the novels that I read. Now, you've written other types of novels as well, which we'll get you back to talk about, because, like I said, you're in now, Shane, your family, it's happening. So here are these people, and they just are living their lives, sometimes with complications. And I felt like this was an important thing to you, that they were everyday people, and that I was very impressed with your way of observing people and the little nuances as far as movement, sounds. I'm not supposed to be but I just am so impressed with your observational abilities with people. Now, you have traveled a lot?
Yes.
How much have you traveled, Shane? Let's get that out of the way.
Well, I have an ambition to visit one country for every year of my life. I have been to 68 countries to date, and I'm holding to that one country for every year of my life. So I'm not telling you my age. You can figure it out. And so that's what I have done. I've lived in 4 countries. Lived long term, but I've traveled to 68. So I keep doing that. Every year I try to notch one country, and it helps me, because when you travel, your creative juices get unleashed. It helps with the flow. And I usually find I come back and I'm able to write something. It may not be about the country I visited, but it could be something else. But something has unlocked my stasis, if you will. I found it extremely difficult during the pandemic. For 2 years, I couldn't go anywhere, and it did hurt my creativity. I know that. I was writing memoirs, and I was writing, articles, but I was not writing anything creative. So travel is important. It's been part of my life for as long as I can remember, and I will try to do it because traveling is not also easy these days. It is getting more difficult and more expensive. So for as long as I can do it, I will continue to do it because it does certainly help my creativity. Now, in terms of I write about normal people, is that if you look at the novel really came of age when the middle classes started to rise in the West, and it is about normal people. It is not about. It's not an epic. Epics about heroes, and lyrics are about saints and all that. But novels are about normal people. And so that's why I try to keep my novels to normal people in somewhat extraordinary circumstances. So as you can know in my 2 books that you read, they get into some pretty tough pickles, right? And they have to extricate themselves from that pickle. And it's how they go about it. Sometimes they don't quite get out of it. But for the most part, they something gets resolved. And there's a movement from point A when you start the novel to point Z when you end the novel. They have made a journey, and a journey of personal growth, and that's what I like to show in my books. Yeah.
So, and even though you say these are not epic novels, I just want to point out that, like the Hobbits in the Lord of the Rings, your character in Empire in the Sand, by saving himself and the people he loved, he ended up saving a whole lot more people and maybe a country with what he was stopping from going on. So when I always say a great man is a great person is someone who takes care of the people they love and is loyal and there for them, right? Not running off, not that travel is bad. Running off to explore the Arctic and leaving them for years. You know how it used to be with explorers. Yeah. But the people who took care of what was happening on the home front. And so your character definitely does that. Well, trying to find himself and going through some uncomfortable situations for him, because it's okay. You have people just read Empire in the Sand. Okay. I was blown away.
Should I show the picture?
That's right. I forgot to say, bring your novels, show them, because mine are on ebook, and it's not the same. It glares. Empire in the Sands is definitely it's great. It's great. I also believe that Circle in the Spiral, that's it, right? Yes. Circles in the Spiral is also a great book. And a journey that just covers everything. Shane, that book covers everything. Yes. I want to start off by saying there is a lot of trauma in this book with the characters through foster home and childhood abuse. So if that's something that you're not good with, that might make you feel more than you should, or you have experienced, you might just want to be careful with that. But outside of and sometimes you have to go to those places in order to tell a story, right?
Yes.
To get these things out and to get them across. Now, at the end of your book, as I said, I read the little part that you write at the end.
Yes.
You said that. Well, do you tell the story of how this book came to be?
Well, yes, I think Circles in the Spiral, because it's the one that's got the mature content, if you will, needs a little bit of an explanation. I typically take about 5 to 7 years before a book of mine gets published, because I spend a lot of time on drafts. I let it sit. I get people to critique it. But Circles in the Spiral broke that mold. It was published the year after I wrote it, because it came to me in one big blob. And I knew I could not ever write another book like that. I could never improve it or do anything more with it. It was done, and it had to come out. And the reason for that was just before I wrote this book, I had a fall down the stairs on my birthday, actually, and I went into cardiac arrest. I was pronounced dead for 6 minutes or so, and and of course I unfortunately didn't see the tunnel, and I didn't see myself on the ceiling looking down at my body and all that stuff. So I'm still now wondering what happened afterwards. However, I came out of the ICU 9 days later, and they just sent me home. But of course, they put me on a barrage of drugs to try and normalize me, I guess. And in that state, I was quite uncensored, unfiltered. I had no controls. And so I also thought I couldn't write another book again because I was standing in front of the computer and nothing was coming out. And then when it finally started coming out, this story started coming out. And it's also a story of trauma. And I think I had gone through a lot of trauma in that incident. Also, I'm an immigrant, having come to Canada 30 some odd years ago. The trauma of immigration still hasn't left and probably will never leave. So I've had a lot of trauma in my life at different times. And this incident probably unlocked a lot of that. And it transformed into this story of a blocked writer, who I was at the time because I couldn't write anything, trying to come back. Just like every man who's fired from his company is trying to come back. And my whole life has been this kind of, you go and then you fall off and then you try to come back. So he's trying to come back, and he gets sucked into a federal government election, which we knew happened in 2019 when foreign actors were trying to sabotage our federal government election. So I took that theme and I threw this guy into that. I also had, the whole trauma thing in him coming out as a consequence of him having bad dreams. And I tried to mix the whole thing together and see how these themes would collide with each other and create something. And for once, my plot was not linear. Most of my plots tend to be linear, with some flashbacks here and there, but they're mostly linear. This one was circular, if you noticed. It started in one place and it ends in the same place. And it goes and meets people once and then meets them again and meets them again. And so it's this circular plot. And that's why I call it Circles in the Spiral, because he's spiraling in some kind of circle, if you will. And he's trying to find resolution. And yes, resolution does come in the end. And so when I finished this book, I thought, my gosh, I'll never write another book like this. I don't want to tamper with it. It's done, and it needs to go out the way it is. And so, yes, it's raw. It's unvarnished, if you will. But I think it's also very true. I don't think
It is. I was going to ask you how much research you did in some of these subjects, because it did ring true.
Yeah, it did.
Did you?
I did some research, but also I was in a Catholic school back in my home country of Sri Lanka, where there had been abuse and there had been trauma, and my classmates were some of those children who had suffered. So these things were not foreign to me. I'd lived alongside these things, maybe unconsciously for a long time. So this process of going through this,
and it all came out at
that time.
There are very raw and real and gritty scenes in that book, but I still feel like they were, in the way people will talk about women, or there have been some books that sort of glorify that in the whole old Dashiell Hammett kind of thing. And I did not feel that you were glorifying in any way. The characters were either feeling bad about themselves, or they were beyond, they were the bad guys. And this is the way they behave. So, sorry. Excuse me. I thought it was very real, very well done. The characters were completely authentic to me. I'm not, like I said, I am not a person that goes for the cheap thrill in a novel. These were real thrills, real fears, real everything. And you hit everything from that year. You hit, fake news, spiritual gurus, the election, the changing of roles of humanity. Just like it, honestly, people, this is a book. So if you can get when I say a book, it's like AJ, there it is. If you are, it's just, you have to read it. You totally have to read it. If it is not something that's going to, like I said at the beginning, it is not for the faint of heart. But I think if you see it as fiction and you just look into it, I think it's a great book. Maybe not for everyone, and that's what I'm pointing out, but definitely a book that you want to look into. So now, having said that about that book, and in Empire in the Sand, we deal with corporate greed. We deal with money. I mean, everything comes down to money. Let's face it, regardless of whether it's pride or whatever, it always just comes down to money. And all of those things. And there is commentary on that in these books. How do you think it's important to put commentary into novels, or it depends on the person, or it's just how it worked out? How does the whole social commentary in fiction work with you?
Yeah, I'd rather the commentary comes through the dialogue of the characters.
Yeah, you don't want to be preachy.
No, I'm not preaching.
No, not at all.
At the same time, though, there are these two schools of writers: the moralistic writers and the ones who claim they're not moralistic. And you have the Dostoevskys and the Tolstoys and all those guys in the moralistic camp, and then you have the Maupassants and the Anton Chekhovs and all the guys in the non-moralistic camp. And I if I have to weigh which side do I fall on, I'm probably on the moralistic camp, because I have subtle messages. I don't try to, as you say, preach, but in the actions of the characters and the outcome of the story, I think I'm making a kind of a stand on which side of the camp I want to be in. And so so that happens, and the themes that come out in Empire in the Sand, for instance, are things that really happened to me. I was in the corporate world for a long time. I had a fairly senior job, and then it vanished. The world financial crisis came, and we were all put out to pasture, and it was over. And so in this particular case, this guy is working for a pharmaceuticals company, and they're not a very straight shooting company. They have lots of secrets. And then he's fodder, he's gotten rid of. And he's not yet ready to go, because he feels that he should go off on a high, not on a low. And so he's looking to try and find that high. And it happens to a lot of people. The whole of our society, after we reach the age of 50, in companies, we're pretty much out the door, especially if you're at senior positions.
And they don't talk about that.
They don't talk about that. And you're supposed to somehow survive between 50 and 65 when you can qualify for pension benefits. And that middle 15 years is a blank. So I thought that was a social issue that
it's welcome to Walmart.
Exactly. It needs to be put on the table, and it needs to be talked about. It needs to be explored. It needs to be in novels, because otherwise people are never going to talk about it. So that's why that theme got in there. And also, I'm fairly big on in honesty in elections. You'll note both these books are about federal government elections. There was the 2019 one in Circles in the Spiral, and the 2011 robocall scandal in the Empire in the Sand. The reason being is I've lived in countries where the political process was so corrupt that democracy was just a name, Whereas I think in Canada we still have. I don't know about the United States, and I know this is being broadcast in the United States, but they're going through their soul searching right now. But these countries still have vestiges of democracy that still hold firm, and we have to protect it, because democracy is about being vigilant all the time, right? Lest somebody come and corrupt it. And I think these themes are topical, and they need to be part of our fiction, our literature. That's why I bring these into these books.
Well, and I personally I loved fables when I was a kid, Aesop's and stuff. So I am not automatically look for the moral in the story, regardless of what camp is reading it. So I'm going to be a little bit more aware that these things are happening than somebody else. Is it enjoyable read without these things? Enjoyable? I don't know if either of this may be a little twitchy, uncomfortable, but, because it does speak honestly, but it is a good read. Now, when we talk about that and social commentary, I noticed on your influences list on your Goodread that John Steinbeck was put on there.
Yes.
John Steinbeck was, while other girls were reading Bronte or whatever, I was deep into Mr. Steinbeck, like, just obviously because I was looking for the moral of the story. Do you think he influenced some of these methods of writing for you?
Yes, yes, definitely. I was a big John Steinbeck fan, and a Graham Greene fan, and of course Ernest Hemingway and Scott Fitzgerald and all that. But certainly Steinbeck, very much so in my late teen years. I read all his books, Cannery Row and Tortilla Flats and The Grapes of Wrath and all that during those years. And the one thing I didn't like about Steinbeck was he had a very biblical style. He would write in a very, he was almost like Faulkner. So I couldn't emulate that style, and it didn't work for me. But his themes of dealing with simple folk down in that little world that he created for himself in the Salinas Valley, that worked for me, because what he did was he didn't try to conquer the whole world. He brought the world into this valley and all the world's issues into this valley, and it was a way of making it accessible to us. In a small confined space. Now, have done the same thing, because one of my novels that you haven't read yet, but I hope you'll read one day, is called Milltown. And because I now live in a small town in Ontario, I have sort of started to absorb the vibes of a small town, and I can see that the ills of the world also exist in small towns. So I call my town Milltown. I published one book in 2019. It was called Milltown. It was a start. I've written another one about the pandemic in the same town. I've written several stories.
So
I'm developing a kind of a place that
Mhm.
I can center my fiction, and that I think I owe to John Steinbeck, because he definitely influenced me in that with his Salinas Valley stories. So,
And the real people, and I think that is one of the things that draws me to your books. It's not about the big game. It's about it's just a big game to the people that are involved. It's just as important, but it's working out on a more personal level.
yeah.
And in that way, I see cause and effect. There isn't this big destiny or whatever. It is cause and effect that are causing these things to happen. It goes around in those circles, and I see them as almost characters in your book. As this cause and effect, here it comes, it's hitting me again, which I found very unique. So we're talking about Steinbeck and just hitting the road with Travels with Charlie and
Yeah.
going out there, which applies a lot to your life as well. But I want to know how this applies to, I know that it was mentioned, I picked up on ending up in Denmark without any money. Now, this has got to be an experience that lends to writing.
Yes, no, that was a very embarrassing episode. It was when I was living in Sri Lanka. At the time, we were not allowed to take money out of the country, so you had a limited pool of funds to take out. And I had miscalculated my spending and my days and so on. And I ran out of money 3 days before I was supposed to take my flight out of Denmark. And so I ended up in Copenhagen Airport, Kastrup, the main airport. And I slept there for 3 nights, eating apples and drinking milk, because that's all I could afford. I didn't even have the money to take a taxi ride or a bus ride into the town to see the Little Mermaid statue that I had intended to see.
Oh, because
Yeah,
of
so
Sean.
I know. Maybe on a future one day I can go back and see the statue, but that was a pretty embarrassing, I would say, traumatic experience, and also very sort of humbling, because you realize when you come from the third world, the first world is such an expensive place. Now I live in the first world, and I can sympathize with my fellow countrymen from the old home as to how things would have been, because I was in that same spot. And so, yes, that was a pretty awful misadventure, if you will, that I can never forget. I've had a few others like that, but
Well, I
take another whole show to talk about those.
I understand the pain and the food shortages and everything, but my heart is broken that you didn't get to see the Hans Christian Andersen statue. I mean, that is the fairy tales, and it was a fairy. Yeah. So applying never mind. Anyways, this show is going in circles. So moving on, I do want to read those other books. I want Milltown was on my list, but I didn't quite get to it. So I need to like set apart 6 hours a day to read, I think, at this point. To really just and you know what, sometimes I'm ready to go there. You read, this is what people don't, you read and you suddenly forget everything else. It's a holiday in itself, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Your the two novels I read were kind of scary holidays, but still a holiday nonetheless. So we're going to go back to another blog now, and I'm not even going to wait for the perfect segue. And it was about robots and AI, and how I love the way that you said in time to come, it will become, having a real author write something would be like getting, a barista at a small coffee brewery. You're back to that like artistic sensibility kind of thing.
And so the robots are very important to me because I've just written my robot novel. It will probably come out next year. Again, this is one of those that breaks the tradition of waiting 5 or 6 years before publishing a book, because the robot phenomenon is moving very fast. And if you wait too long, whatever you've written becomes obsolete and becomes historical fiction, not science fiction.
And they'll have taken over.
Yes, exactly. So the intention is to get that out fairly quickly. But the theme of that book is about not so much robots helping authors. There is an author and a publisher in the whole book as well, and there is an interplay there. But the bigger issue is, can we create a sensate robot, so a robot with conscience and feeling? And in so doing, will we get it wrong? It's the Frankenstein story again, right? But in a different age, with different set of technological tools, and a different set of values. Because the problem that I find with these sensate robots or whatever we create is that if we do imbue them with a consciousness, they may take on the values of the inventor. And if the inventor has a flawed morality, then the robot's going to adopt the same thing. And so it's
who is planting those ideas in their head that is going to have you're a thinker, Shane. You're a thinker. So it's going to deal with the ramifications,
yes,
of creating this and the people that are creating it.
But on the other hand, though, there is no question, because you had answered, will it change the writing business? It will, and it has already. So we know for now that most authors have adopted some form of AI as a tool to help them. So whether it's the Chat GPT writing some sentences for you, or editing your work to make sure it's grammatically correct, or whether you have one of these AI tools that can convert a text into an image, so that you can have illustrations in your work. Those things are already being done. I use them too for those purposes. But at the end of the day, those are still tools. They're like using a computer or using Google as you write your article. They're just an extension of that. What we don't want to see, or what we don't want to cross, is where you outsource everything to the robot and says, "Here, write my book, write my article, come up with all the illustrations, put my name at the bottom of it so that it comes to me, and then ship it out. And I'm just going to be on the beach reading and waiting for my check." That's when it starts to get really murky. And that's when those guys take over, right? So that's.
And do you believe that it can ever equal a real, like, I can't imagine a robot writing Shane Joseph, okay? Because there's so much nuance and there's so much personal experience. And do you think they could get to the point that they could really do that?
Well, I tried that because apparently you can now teach your robot to write like you, to emulate your style. So what you have to do is to feed them enough of your articles. So I tried with about 5 or 6 of my blog articles. I gave the robot these articles and said, now write like me and write. And I gave them the subject and how long the article should be, and asked it to write little passages and a heading, and it did that. And I must say the standard was like me in grade 8, which was not bad, because I figured, okay, these robots are growing exponentially. So by next week, it'll be writing like me in grade 10, right? And then by next month, it'll be me writing in university. And by 6 months from now, it'll be me writing like me. If I train it. So
without like, I'm saying that it can fake the personal experience. It can, like, you can feed it in the details of your life, and it can,
to the extent that you can give it information, I think it can work with it, right? Because I mean, when you look at it, when we write something, we don't put our entire life into that article. We take extracts from our life. So if for the purpose of the article, you give it the necessary inputs that you think it needs, it could come up with something that is comparable with what you would have written anyway. So, I'm not discounting that robots cannot take over what we do. My question is more, should we? It should.
Oh, that's all. Yeah, nobody ever says it's not about can, it should, and that is what your novel is going to be about.
Yes.
And so, is that going to come out in the fall with your fall releases, or next year?
I'd like to do a spring release if I could, because then I have time to keep promoting it through the fall. Because you see, in where I live, we have the Northumberland Festival of the Arts. It's a very big event that takes place every 2 years. And we time our book launches to coincide with that event, because then it gets a lot more noise. And so, yes, I could time it with the festival, or I could do it earlier and then keep promoting it until the festival comes along. I don't know yet. It depends on how quickly I can get it edited. Because the other thing, too, with my books is I don't just self-publish them as people would think I do. I then give my books out to be edited by an independent editor, because I expect the same level of editorial scrutiny that I put on my authors through me on my own books. So I have to give it out to the editor, and I'd work with that editor for a while before we come to some kind of agreement that the book is ready.
Because you don't always see your book
the
same way. You have an image in your head, and that projects when you're reading it, yes, whether it's there or not. I mean, I think it's an important step. Absolutely. To have other people read our work and beta, whoever we can get, just read this.
So for the record, though, all my authors, the books that I publish, I edit them. I go through several rounds with them. In fact, you may want to ask Janice when you get her on the show of how that experience was, going back and forth between the.
How mean was he, Janice?
That's right.
You've twice given us permission to talk about you.
Yes, please do. I mean, I'm an open book, and I'm sure Janice will have opinions on it. But yes, that's the kind of rigor that I think needs to be brought into the process, because that will also eliminate this stigma that exists that
it's very important.
Are awful authors. No, they're not. If they do it correctly, if they follow all the steps that the big guys do, then there's no difference between what they do and what the big guys do.
No, and we talk about that, do-it-yourself publishing. What you're not good at, you can hire other people for. For example, you also have editing services as well, right? That you will, because you have to pay for those trips somehow, Shane. And so... So this is important. But back to the thing. So what you're saying is there is a possibility that writing will become the next craft brewery, the next, it's sort of like that little brown paper tag that says a real writer made this.
Yes, exactly. Handcrafted.
And so in order to prove that, you're going to have to get a little booth with a big window and sit there doing your typing all day. And And really, to keep the aesthetic going, you're going to have to do it on one of those cool old typewriters. No more computers.
Yeah.
It's gotta look authentic in the way people picture it. So, yeah, these are all things to think about, and to think about more. Would you just get the book out, Shane? You're the publisher. You can put it out whenever you want to.
I'll try to get it out next year. Let's put it out.
Okay, so if I end up at the Halliburton Arts Festival, is that? Do they have a lot of books
It's
there?
Northumberland Art Festival.
Northumberland.
Yeah.
Do they have a lot of books there, or is it?
We have, the last one was last year, and we had 42 events. I think it's not just books. It's film, it's theater, it's dance, it's oh my gosh, painting. It's all the arts, performing arts, visual arts, literary arts, all of those combined. We bring in people mostly from around the area. We have the indigenous people. We have the the marginalized groups. It's big, and so in there, I usually do an anthology. You've probably seen the Hill Spirits anthology.
Right.
So I do an anthology which includes writers from all over the area. We have about 30 to 40 of them who contribute for each of those anthologies, and so that's another way of celebrating the local talent. Bringing them all together. I really like those anthologies because they have actually spawned some of those authors to go out and publish their work on their own, full-fledged work of their own. So it has been a kind of a showcasing of these people initially, and then giving them the confidence to go out and do full-length work later on. So that's been something that I'm very proud of, and very happy that I was able to do in this area that I live in.
So no, it sounds great. It sounds like we all have to go. Okay, people. So someone start planning. We'll rent a bus.
Please come out.
And we'll be there. We'll be there. Oh my gosh, but we are running further on time. I'm going to take 2. And I'm going to take time to figure out the 2. I'm going to waste time. No, your latest blog is Does the Other Make Us Stronger? And we're talking about healthy competition in writing, and to take it totally out of the artistic and writing and area, it would be Stallone and Schwarzenegger say that they would not have been as successful if they hadn't competed on body count and
Yes.
box office things, and their competition helped them to grow stronger. And you wrote about that in the course of writing, that it is sort of good to keep your eye not just on what other people are doing and how that applies to yourself.
Yes. Yeah, no, I totally believe that we have to have people who are better than us to make us better, right? Every time I go out to play golf with somebody who plays better golf than I have a better game. So we have a writing critiquing group where we sort of feed off each other, and I belong to a couple of groups, and that presenting yourself in front of them and having them critique you, and then reading their work and critiquing back, this what do you call tension, creative tension that exists is important. A quote from Thomas Mann, he said, "Everything that comes into being comes despite something else." So it is that, pushing against something that unleashes creativity. And so, yes, I think the other does make us stronger. It's a pain in the neck to have another.
Well, no, but
it does improve things.
So you're sitting there before the next writing group saying, "I will show you," and working 16 times on that same sentence to get it perfect before you stand up and read it, right?
That's something.
And that in turn, and also it gives you practice for dealing with editors and publishers, right? You learn to take, if you see it as constructive criticism, because it's a tough business that you're not going to make any money on. Yeah, why?
Because writers have very strong egos, right? I mean, it's important that you have an ego because it's the life force, but it's this, and it's what allows you to create. We're not meditating under a tree where we let go of ego. We are creating. So we have to have strong egos. And then when you get criticism, it batters the ego. And so it's a soul crushing kind of experience. And yet you have to go through that in order to create. And so it's a tough thing. And that's what I call the other. The other is not just a person, it's various forces. I mean, even being an indie and trying very hard to be noticed is having an other in your face.
Oh, you have to do the I don't even know how you have to do the social media, you have to do the branding yourself, you have to get out there, and you have to call me. No. You're good. But this is the thing. Ego gets a bad rap, but in order to survive, you have to protect your time for that book. That book has to become, or as a friend says, the story is everything. You have to protect your time. You have to listen to constructive criticism, but you can't be deflated. I mean, it's an important thing when it comes to art.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's a necessary. And what I want to know, because, I need some happiness after that whole missing out on the Little Mermaid statue. Now, you thank your wife, Sarah, in one of the dedications or whatever for being there. And one of the characters in one of the novels, I don't want to give spoilers, is a very grounded, lovely woman called Sarah. Is that a gift to your wife, or did that just happen?
No, it is, in a sense. It is a reflection of her, because when we started the press back in 2011, it was her idea. She was the one who pushed me into it and said, why can't you do this yourself? Why do you have to depend on these other people who don't even return your emails? You submit things to them and they ignore you for months. That's not good customer service. Why don't you just do it yourself? You are responsive to people. You are technically adept. Just do it. And that's what I did. So it was her encouragement and her courage, because she even opted to become the publisher for the first few years, because at that time it was not very fashionable that the writer should be the publisher. There was a right. And then, of course, there was the indie movies that came out and the indie music that came out, where it became fashionable to produce and sell your own music and your films.
But it's still missing in the indie world of publishing.
Absolutely. It's starting to come back now, because the Writers Union allowed self-published writers to become members and so on, because they realized they were missing something, right? So when that fashion started to come back, because, I mean, remember, back in the 1800s and 1900s, a lot of authors self-published their work, right?
No. Well, okay, I would like to bring this to the attention, The Christmas Carol.
Yes.
By Charles Dickens. Nobody wanted to publish it. He needed money. Okay, let's face it. And he published that book. And what book is remembered and celebrated and copies still selling every holiday season?
Yeah, absolutely. So
The Christmas Carol.
So anyway, going back to Sarah, I think I'm grateful to her for what she did and pushed me into doing it. And I think she was extremely grounded and courageous, because I was waffling a little bit at the time. So yes, I think when I was looking for a strong, grounded woman character, the name came straight to mind. And I said, that's it. She's going to be called Sarah.
See, this is how I needed the story to go, Shane. And I love that. Okay, we don't have to wait to talk to you, because Janice is here, ladies and gentlemen, and she says that working with Shane was a great collaboration and encouraged my creativity. An amazing first-time experience. Thanks, Shane.
Thank you, Janice.
So there you go. Janice has said it all. But I need to stop this, because someday I might actually finish a novel, and I don't want to have you to go through like thousands of books to get through it. But you have lots of time to wait on that one, Shane, regardless of how much I yell at other authors to finish their books so I can read them. So it has been a delight to have you here. I'm glad that we had a chance to talk. Finish off the robot novel, but you have lots of other books for people to check out and read until that happens. And finish. You have to come back. So definitely we'll be seeing you again. Okay.
Thank you very much, Vicky.
Oh, you're welcome. Take care of yourself and Sarah. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye. Bye. And for the rest of you, I will see you next week. Until then, may your coffee be hot and your story sweet. Thanks for listening, everyone.